Kelsey. This is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing one of my fancy booktube hats, and today I'm doing my January book haul. Woohoo! So my birthday was in January, and I did ask for some book things for my birthday that are very, very exciting for me. And I did in fact receive the book things that I asked for, as well as some other book gifts that I wasn't expecting at all. So I'm going to start with everything that I got for my birthday, which is actually going to be the majority of the books in this haul, even though they may not take the longest time to cover, because most of them are this big uniform stack of something that you may have noticed in the thumbnail. So my birthday comes right after Christmas, and with the two right after the other, my parents are sometimes, you know, needing help figuring out what to get me, and they ask me, Kelsey, is there anything in particular that you want for your birthday? And this year I said, well, actually, you know, in fact, there kind of is. And what this is a stack of something that I would never actually buy for myself all at once like this, but I'm really happy to have. I'm turning around here. This is all of the Andrew Lang colored fairy books. All 12 of them. So these are 12 volumes of collected fairy tales from around the turn of the 20th century. Going through them in order because I've stacked them in publication order. They are the blue fairy book, the red fairy book, the green fairy book, the yellow fairy book, the pink fairy book, the gray fairy book, the violet fairy book, the crimson fairy book, the brown fairy book, the orange fairy book, the olive fairy book, and the lilac fairy book. Now, I have already read the olive fairy book because I had read it on my Kindle in the month of December. So I can link my December wrap-up where I talked about the stories in this volume. This is one of the later ones, of course, and the stories later on in this series of books get pretty obscure, which is a lot of what I enjoyed about this one. I am planning on reading all of them eventually, but this is more of like a life goals plan than like an immediate reading goals plan. Like, over my lifetime, I would like to read all of the Andrew Lang colored fairy books. And in the meantime, all of these are a nice enough set that I can, like, display them in my living room instead of, like, stuffing them away in my bedroom like most of my books. I believe these are all used copies, but they are used in very, very good condition. Most of these are like new. Next, I have one more book that I had hinted to my parents that I kind of might like, and that is Lud-in-the-Mist by Hope Mirrlees. This is a classic fantasy novel from 1926, so this is around the same time as, like, Lord Dunsany's King of Elfland's Daughter, which I really liked, but this is a female author writing a fantasy novel. Sylvia Kay has told me I will really, really like this book, but it is very hard to find a nice edition of this in the US. It's in the public domain, so you can find, like, really crappy, weird editions, but this is, like, the only really nice edition that I'm aware of, and it's a UK edition, so I asked for this from Book Depository. The next book that I got for my birthday that I was hoping for from my aunt is Black Powder War by Naomi Novik. This is the third in the Temeraire series. She gave me the second one, Throne of Jade, for Christmas, having given me His Majesty's Dragon last year, which I have read at this point and really enjoyed, and I was eager to continue on with the series. So now I have both Throne of Jade and Black Powder War now as well. And then, surprise, surprise, I got a package in the mail from a good friend of mine with 2 more books for my birthday. She sent me a nice little note. She says, I haven't been keeping up with your booktube to know what you've been reading, but these are 2 of my favorites that I hope are new to you. These are both books that I haven't read yet. One of them I was planning on reading, one of them I was not. So the one I was already planning on reading eventually was The Thief by Megan Whalen Turner. This is the beautiful new paperback edition. These new editions came out to match the new book that came out in the series this year. I'm kind of lying when I say I haven't read this because I did read this as a kid, but I wasn't aware that there were more in the series until very recently, so I am planning on rereading this book and then continuing on with the series. I do own a copy, not nearly as nice as this copy, so I'll be getting rid of that copy and keeping this one. And then the second book is the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, which I know just about nothing about. Let's see. This is historical fiction set in the 1940s. So that's the end of my birthday books. The rest of the books here are mostly used books with just a few new books that I bought for myself, but a lot of them are used, very cheap copies. I'm going to start with things that I got for $1, because I love my $1 bargain books, and then I will move on to things that I got for, gasp, more than $1. So the first $1 book that I have here is this lovely bind-up edition of the first 3 books in the Parasol Protectorate series. Now, I believe this edition is out of print. I had seen this edition also on Sylvia Kay's channel, and I was insanely jealous because I know some people really like these covers of these books. I do not. The costumes on the covers of these look like someone just did a quick Google search for steampunk costume and bought the first thing that showed up. The millinery is atrocious. And on just about every single book in the series, the model is striking a pose that, like, you physically cannot hit that pose if you're wearing a Victorian corset. This, however, I find much more convincing. So, I've read the first book in this series, Soulless. I also had a copy of the second book, Changeless. Again, what is with that hairdo? What is with that costume? What is with that pose? I did not have a copy of the third book, Blameless, so I would have bought a copy of just the third book for $1. Instead, this is a bind-up of a preferable edition where I get that one book that I would have bought for the $1, and I get to unhaul these 2 copies as well, and I only paid $1 for this hardback edition. I don't know, like, I've only read the first book, but there is no indication in the first book that there is alt-historical millinery in this particular steampunk universe. Like, the costumes and the hats in Soulless, the way I read the book, I took them to be like real Victorian costume. What is with this hat? These are Victorian lady hats. These are actual Victorian lady hats. This is an antique fashion plate. This is what it looked like. This is much, much closer to the real thing. So, rant over, I'm moving on to my other 2 $1 books. The first of which is Red Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson, the first book in his Mars trilogy. Robinson is one of those, like, really, really well-known sci-fi authors that I feel like I should read something by. For $1, this seemed like a pretty good bet. The other sort of impulsy $1 book that I got is this book of Irish folk and fairy tales edited by Gordon Jarvie. This is not a particularly well-known book of Irish folk and fairy tales. The editor isn't anyone in particular who's well known, but looking at the table of contents, like, I can tell there are things in this book that I've seen referenced in fantasy novels that I've read, and that I should know the original stories for if I want to, you know, be speaking on those novels with any sort of authority. So I feel like I should at least have a book of Irish folk and fairy tales on hand for reference, if nothing else. I would like, in the long term and like the course of my life, to be reading a lot more original fairy tales, hence all of the Andrew Lang fairy books. But for now, this is more of like a have on hand for reference thing, though I may read the whole thing eventually. And then the last 3 used books are all very exciting for me. One of them is an audiobook. I know a couple used bookstores where I can get used audiobooks for very, very cheap. This is the Book of Dust, Book 1, La Belle Sauvage by Phillip Pullman. Now, I really, really want to reread his Dark Materials before I give this a listen. This seems like a book I would really like to listen to on audiobook. I want to be listening to more audiobooks than I am right now. And yeah, this is still in shrink wrap and it was really cheap. And then my last 2 used books go together, and they are used in very good condition. Copies of Akata Witch and Akata Warrior by Nnedi Okorafor. Now, there was a cover change between the hardcover of the first book and the release of the second book. But I noticed when I actually picked these up off the shelf together and held them up, the spines still match pretty well. Like, the title is in a slightly different font, but like the author's name and the little symbol and the basic styling of the spine still matches. So I don't mind at all that my, you know, hardcover art isn't matching, and I like both cover designs. So I'm hoping to read Akata Witch very, very soon. This is actually a current read for the Goodreads group Into the Forest that I'm a member of, so I'm hoping to pick it up like pronto-ish. And then I don't know when I'll get around to the sequel, but this was a 2017 release that I think got a lot of really good reviews, so I can't wait to dive into this series. This is Nnedi Okorafor's YA fantasy series about a Nigerian-American girl who goes to Nigeria and studies magic there and stuff. People sing the praises of these books. And then continuing on with the 3 new books that I got in January, the first is a continuation because it is Nnedi Okorafor again with Binti, the Night Masquerade, which is the 3rd in the Binti trilogy of adult sci-fi novellas. I cannot wait to read this. The fact that I kind of simultaneously want to read both this and this is troubling for me because I don't want to read both of them like at once. But I want to read both of them like at once. I did pre-order this book, so that tells you how excited I was for it. And then the next thing that I have here is also a new Tor.com novella, and that is The Only Harmless Great Thing by Brooke Bolander. I went to a launch event for this book that got me very, very excited about it. I got my copy signed, and this is super short, but I also think it's gonna be like kind of dense and the kind of thing that you want to sit down and like pay attention to while you read it. So hopefully I'll read it soon. I'm not quite sure when though. And then the last thing just sort of happened to me while I was in Barnes & Noble buying my after Christmas sale wrapping paper like you do. And there was, you know, a table of bargain books, and there was a whole stack of bargain Hamster Princess just staring at me. So I got a bargain-priced copy of Hamster Princess of Mice and Magic, which is the 2nd Hamster Princess book, and no, I have not yet read the first, and yes, these are kids' books. Don't judge me. I think the first one is a bit of a Sleeping Beauty thing, and this is a bit of a 12 Dancing Princess thing, and this series is about Princess Harriet Hamsterbone, who goes around, like, saving the day. So that was my January book haul. I'm not going to hold them all up for you again, you saw the thumbnail. Anyhow, let me know what you think of any of these books. Let me know if you have books of original fairy tales that you particularly like, because I know there were a ton of them in this book haul. All of the Andrew Lang ones, plus the Irish fairy tale one. Anyhow, I hope you're having a nice day. That is all. Bye for now.